Okay, so today I want to talk specifically about how to navigate levels in hockey. And a lot of times, like the biggest issue I see whenever I look at the challenges players are facing is that they typically don't get real tactical advice on how to actually handle moving up and dealing with the challenges that come with moving to different levels. And so the reason I wanted to have a talk with Brendan today is because this is a topic where when you've actually done it and you've been through the challenges, you've dealt with it at basically all different levels, all the way up into the AHL now and currently working his way into the NHL. Like, this is the type of stuff that people can give you generic answers forever, but the stuff that's actually going to help you is getting into the details. So, Brendan, if you want to just jump right in and just kind of give people a background in terms of, what levels you've kind of navigated and where you're at and where you're kind of trying to go right now.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Brendan Furry. I am currently playing in the American Hockey League. I'll just set the stone there. But grew up my whole life kind of in and out of AA and AAA, finding my way, and then played a little high school hockey. And after high school, I was able to play U18 AAA, have the opportunity to get scouted there, worked my way up to a tender with the Amarillo Bulls, and then on as a I guess you want to call it free agent or a walk on to the USHL. And I made the Omaha Lancers, where I was eventually a captain my second year, and then I got traded over to Tri-City to finish out that season. And then I committed to Minnesota State Mankato, Division One, where I played 4 years. We had a great 4 years there, 4 league championships, 2 playoff championships, an NCAA finalist, 2 Frozen Fours, and then I was the captain my senior year, which was a privilege and probably the best 4 years of my life. And now I'm currently in the American Hockey League in the Philadelphia Flyers organization, playing for Lehigh Valley. And I played my first year of pro last year, and now I'm getting ready for my second year.
I love it. Sweet. Well, in terms of kind of like what your current goals are, I mean, obviously, like the next step you're working towards is trying to kind of crack that NHL lineup. So that's kind of the place you're at, is kind of really actually in the journey, which is something I think is very unique that a lot of people don't get exposure to, as somebody who's not necessarily, like, for me, like, I'm not playing anymore and I can talk about what I did do, but you're currently in that process. So tell me, like, what is it kind of like generally, like, just trying to currently make that jump?
Yeah, navigating your way, I think, is a huge thing, and finding the path that I think best suits you. I think a lot of the times when you're going through your career and you're trying to find a way to fit in, and you're trying to find your perfect scenario, but sometimes it doesn't work like that. And yeah, as I'm navigating my way, I'm trying to figure out, what's it going to take to get to the next level, and what do I need to do on a daily basis to get there. And I think a big thing with that is at each level you play at, you're going to be faced with different challenges, and you're going to have to adjust to the different level. And some levels may be easier than others. And then, when you get to the pro level, it's kind of, you're on your own and you got to find your way. And that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm trying to do all the little things, and listening to management and listening to my staff and my peers and my teammates on what it takes to be the best at this level, for myself, and then as a teammate and as a player and as a human being. So that's kind of the broad spectrum for me personally. It's trying to find my path right now. We're in a rebuild, and there's a lot of opportunity in the Philadelphia Flyers organization. And so I just want to make it known that I'm a committed player, and what I'm doing here is, I'm not just here. Like, I want to be the best I can be, and I want to be at the highest level I can be at. And I want them to know that. So I think that kind of rounds it all into my goal and my mission right now, is in the journey I have to get to the NHL, and that's every player's dream. So yeah, just taking it day by day, and seeing what happens. But it truly is exciting to be in the situation I am, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I love it. Sweet. Well, the thing that I'm curious about for you is, like, as I kind of worked my way from like minor to junior, junior to college, I know that there was some very like distinct things that had to change. And for me, like, the difference between even just minor to junior becomes a lot more of, you have to understand development is now fully in your hands, where before that it typically was like your parents would take you to the rink, your parents were hiring skills coaches, and there was other people kind of managing you. And then as you start to move up, there becomes this transition that I watch every player go through that I work with too. And the thing I'm wondering for you, what are kind of the nuances when you were making those jumps? Like obviously like AA, AAA, and then like kind of after that, maybe we can kind of walk through what those jumps were minor and then moving up and then kind of like progressively through there.
Sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, if you really want to go all the way back to the double A, that's just like your fun hockey. Like that, those are the best years of your life. You're not thinking, you're just going out there and playing, and that's that. And maybe at those levels you start to realize that you have a little bit of skill or talent and you might be able to do something with hockey, but ideally you're not really thinking about that. And then when you start working your way up the ranks, and let's say you get to the high school level, or you're playing AAA and like the U16, U18, and you're starting to hit that age where you can start to really, hockey's here having fun, but then like when you really take that jump up here and really start to go after a career possibly. And for me, high school was kind of just fun still, but also kind of finding my way, realizing that, oh, okay, hockey's fun. Like I'm good at it. I think I can do this kind of a thing, but not really sure. And then the real like adjustment, I think, was for me at the U18 level playing AAA. And that was like the eye opener of, there's a lot of good players here. And I'll say this to kind of start it, is the skill gap at each level. When you climb the ranks, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, meaning that skill gap is everyone's good. Everybody at each level, especially me joining AAA, and I hadn't played AAA in years. I'd played a couple years growing up, but when I got to AAA, I was like, okay, everyone's good here. What am I going to do to stand out? What am I going to do to stand out and make it known that I'm the best player on the ice? Because that's a great mentality to have. And so, yeah, it comes down to like your mentality and what you're willing to do. And at the U18 level, you don't really have the resources. It's kind of still on you. But I think that's the first step of getting away from like your parents just taking you to practice and stuff. And okay, am I going to start working out now? And am I going to start training the right way? And then my practice habits, are they good? And those little details start to come in. And then making the jump from AAA to juniors, that skill gap's there, and it's and now these guys are really good. You're looking at them like, wow, these guys are really good. What am I going to do now? And then I think that for me, it was like the switch of becoming an everydayer. And I'm going to say it quite a bit because I believe in it, is when you start to think of hockey as a job instead of just a hobby. I think that was the big transition for me. And in juniors, it was kind of feeling my way out the first year, but you have all the resources in front of you to do it. It's just a matter of if you're going to do it, or if you're going to take the time and the work and put in the work to do those things. And are you going to communicate with your coach on what you need to work on and things like that? And I feel like the junior process it doesn't matter what league you're in. I think it's more of understand. And I think that's the year where you decide, or the 2 years or the 3 years where, okay, hockey's for me, I'm going for this, or okay, I don't think hockey's it. And so my jump was taking all those resources and having a coach that played in the National Hockey League and asking him what it took to get there, and getting the feedback and what it takes to be a good player. And then not only that, what it takes to be a good person and a good teammate off the ice as well. I really started to hone in on those skills and those personality traits at the junior level. And when I took the step to college, that's when I think everything changed to, now this is my job. This is the pro mindset. What am I going to do to do everything I can to get ready for the pro level? And now at the college level, you have every resource that available. You have skills coaches and skating coaches and the nutrition, and you have the strength coach, and you have the diet. You have everything in front of you, and it's really just putting it all together. And that's what really separates, because you're one step away from going to pro now. And that's the separating factor of, we're going to start to weed out the people that aren't an everydayer, the people that aren't doing it every day, and the people that are. And I'm not saying you're not allowed to go out and have fun and hang out with friends and take a breather from the game of hockey, because you need to. Everyone needs to take a break from everything in life at times. But I think at the end of the day, the people that do it on a daily basis and are consistent and want to get better every single day, even when they may not feel like it, are the ones that achieve the next level, where I'm fortunate enough to be at right now in the pro level, where now I have every single resource I could imagine right in front of me. And that skill gap is now like, holy crap, everybody's good. And I think there's a cool stat is, like, in the NHL, 1% of all, less than 1% of all players in hockey make it to the NHL. And to say that I'm one step away from that is pretty cool. And I think that's a little bit of motivation for me as, wow, how cool would that be if I could be in that little category and categorize myself as one of those players that have played in that. And so that's kind of like the shift in my mentality now is, this is a job, and I'm fighting for my job every single day, because someone could come in and take it. And so when I work out, it's all out. When I skate, it's all out. When I'm at home, I'm making sure I'm eating and sleeping and drinking, hydrating, and doing it, all the little things right. Now, it may not work out in the end, but at least I can put my head down on the pillow at night knowing that I've done everything today. I've squeezed as much juice, out of the orange, or however you want to, what analogy you want to use there. But I've squeezed everything I could out of the day to get better, and to know that, I got better today, and it's just going to help me in the future. So I think I know that was a lot of information there, but like, those were the changes at each level that I noticed, and the mentality shift that I've had to where I am now.
Got it. Yeah, and it seems like the really common thread there is there's this consistent leveling up of the mentality side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'd be curious is, like, kind of rewind back to, I know you talked about there was kind of this moment or chunk of time, like, earlier on before you went to junior, where you weren't really like 100% sure like what you were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people who listen to this are probably in these kind of stages where you kind of dip into that. The way I kind of think of it is dipping under the threshold, where
Mm-hmm.
if you get a little bit less belief in yourself, you may step away and just stop pursuing things seriously. And for you, when you kind of went through that transition point where you went from like not 100% sure to like, this is really a job, like that mentality shift,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of happened for you? And like, I want to get into the details of, kind of trying to extract what somebody could take from those moments for you, and potentially be able to apply some actual like mentality skills and upgrade their mental software so they can maybe take that step too.
Yeah, yeah. And this is a great question to kind of ask, because it was that basically that AAA year into juniors was that mindset shift for me, where got rid of the uncertainty of not knowing if I was going to continue with hockey my whole life. And when that season ended, and I had a really good season, and it was really like, it's hard to explain because it's like my own inner feelings, but
Yeah.
when you get there, and it's just like, okay, I'm leaving the house at 18 years old. I'm going off on my own. I don't have anybody there. You still have family there, but I don't have anybody but myself. What am I going to do now? Like, am I just going to throw it all away, or am I going to do this? Like, am I going to actually put all my effort into this? Am I going to try to ride the wave and see what happens? Like, and that was kind of the shift when I realized, like, all right, I'm moving out at 18. It's just kind of scary. I just finished high school. Now what? You're like, what's going to happen now? And I think for me, when I was sitting there and I went and made Omaha at their camp, and I went to main camp, and they kind of told me, they're like, we don't really know if you're going to fit in here, but you did really well at camp, and you proved yourself, and you opened our eyes. But when they told me like I couldn't do it, that was like all right, I'm going to do it. And this is it. And like, this is my job now. And like, it's so like that mentality, it's so different for everybody to get into, but at the end of the day, it was something that I wanted to prove to myself. I wanted to prove people wrong. I wanted to do something that it was my dream ever since I was a kid, and no one was gonna stop me. I was going to do everything it took. And yeah, it took a lot of figuring out. There were a lot of downs with it. There was a lot of trying to figure out, how am I going to work out now? Or if we really want to get into the details, I had to lose some body weight and like get stronger, and so I could get fitter and better on the ice. And that was a big adjustment for me. I didn't really know anything about nutrition and strength training, and I really struggled with that for, I would say, until about my sophomore year at college, until I really like figured out how to dial in my body. But that was a mental battle that I was dealing with, and it may not be with other people, but for me, that was something. And I relied on the resources that I had around me. I had my family and all of the stuff that was in front of me and available. I kind of just relied on them and really tried to just take everything that I had and put it all together. I'm sorry, I'm like repeating and getting repetitive here, but I really tried to do everything I could to be the best version of me every single day. And so that mindset flipped for me right when I left the house at 18, and I was driving to Omaha, and I was like, what the heck is going on now? And like, this is it. This is real. And I'm not going to waste this opportunity, because I don't know if I'll ever have another chance like this again. And I don't want to regret it one day. So I think just being able to hone in on that mentality part of it, and it's easier said than done for sure. But I think that was like the big key thing I noticed for me, was just kind of trying to flip a switch in my head of that this is it, this is my job now, and like I'm not going to let anybody disrupt that and like disrupt my goal. And that was, I guess, the flip of the switch for me.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest things whenever I work with a player. There's this mentality sometimes that like I'm here now, so now it's just going to kind of work out. And I remember that was like a big mistake I made kind of like several times when I like moved up levels or switched to different teams. It was kind of this, now I've kind of, the work has kind of earned me this, and then it was kind of, you can settle back a little bit. And I don't know if you like kind of experienced this. This is why I'm kind of curious, is did you ever notice, like especially in junior, was there ever like a time where you felt almost like you started to get that kind of comfort level, and maybe some of the things that allowed you to be like an everyday, or like you were saying, like maybe that didn't always happen? Because I know for me, like there was times where it was very clearly, I can remember, you could kind of say, oh, well, hang out with the boys like a couple times this weekend, or it's not as big of a deal to do this extra cardio. Maybe I don't need to get up super early. But when you're constantly kind of like not sure if you're going to have a spot, which I think is like the benefit of moving up levels, like it forces you to always be like uncomfortable. So therefore you have to be that person, or else you just won't survive. But I'm kind of curious, like for you, did you find like, first of all, it seems like the discomfort drove you a lot of like, I'm not going to allow this to slip away. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then did you find like other stuff where it was like, I did get comfortable and I wish I had have like understood how to manage this before?
Sure. I think comfortability is like a thing that everyone falls back on at the end of the day. You try to find what makes you comfortable, and it's hard to stray away from that. And I think
Yeah.
that's a mentality piece that if you can figure that out, you're really going to have an advantage at every single level that you go to, because at every level you get to, it gets more and more and more uncomfortable. And yeah, it's easy for me to go back and think of all the little moments where, it might have been cheating a rep in the weight room, or cheating a set, like, oh, like, I don't really want to do that last part, so I'm just going to skip it and act like I did it. Like those little things. And I've done it. I'm guilty of it. And I know a lot of other guys have done it, and you just think, it's okay. Like it won't catch up to me. But then there's the person next to you that's doing it, And it may not seem like a big difference at that time, but when they're the one succeeding and you're not, then it's a real look in the mirror and you're like, wow, maybe if I would have did that extra set, or if I would have finished the drill, or if I would have finished my sprint, maybe I would be in his position. And it's the really shitty feeling to be in, like that. And you don't want to have that feeling. And that's part of growing up. It's part of life, and it's part of maturing, and everyone's going to go through it. I would say in those moments where you do get the thought of, I'm okay, I'm not going to do this, try to push yourself to do it, and just think of your future self, and think of, my future self would be proud, and knowing that at the end of the day, like, you can go to bed and knowing that you didn't cheat the day, I think is huge and important. And I can think of examples now where, even I can go back to yesterday when I just got done weightlifting and I was tired, and my hands were pretty beat up because we were doing deadlifts, so they were sore. And I go, I'll just shoot pucks tomorrow because I don't want my hands to be sore. But then I sit there and I think about it, and I'm like, wow, I can still shoot pucks. It's not gonna matter. My hands are gonna be sore either way. Yeah. But am I gonna cheat myself, or am I gonna do it? And like, it still comes up every single day. And so it's how you handle those situations and how you find a way to get through them, and almost understand that, yeah, like, you're gonna have those days where you do cheat yourself, but what are you gonna do to make up for it the next day? Or what are you gonna do more of in the future to try to elevate your game and to be better than the person next to you, and to just get as much out of yourself as you can each day. And so I like, you don't want to be too hard on yourself, but also you do need to be really hard on yourself as well. Just try to remind yourself that, like, if you really want to be the best in the world, they're doing it. And if you take your foot off the gas, it may hurt you in the long run. So that would be my advice for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the tactic I always use for players, that sounds like it's exactly what you kind of like have just naturally learned to do, which is you envision, you have a clear vision, and you have a clear anti-vision. The ability to understand that you know what you're working towards, which like pulls you forward, but then you also are very, very clear of exactly what it is that you are running away from. Mm-hmm. And I think that it sounds to me like there was always this awareness for you of there is something that I do not want to happen. Mm-hmm. And I think what can happen, especially like in this is what a lot of older people will say, is like, oh, it's a soft generation, which I think every generation says. But what I notice with that pattern is that it's sometimes by thinking that, like, only positively thinking and only looking at just what our vision is of what, like, the good things are, sometimes we forget about, well, there's actually something that I very clearly don't want to happen. And there's actually a ton of like mindset research that actually shows, like, you will actually push yourself harder to avoid something than you will push yourself to get something. Mm-hmm. That's why when people run out of money, they suddenly all of a sudden find the way to work and earn the money, when if you want to get a little extra, it's really hard to do that extra work. So what do you think, like, about that stuff?
Well, I think you nailed the head right there, because if you think of, I mean, that's anything in life. And I mean, you look at entrepreneurs, like people like that, they're not looking at a paycheck like, I have a paycheck, what am I going to spend it on? It's, no, I have a paycheck, what am I going to do to make this? Well, how am I going to double this? And I think that's a good mindset to have in life, is what, with what I have here, now what can I do to get more out of this? And I think once you're able to figure that out, and it's going to take time, like, it's not just going to come overnight or whatever, but if you can start to train yourself and train your mentality and your brain and to think like that, I think you make such a good point there, because it's difficult to do. And I sit there and I think about all the times where, like, I miss so many events and I miss so many different things, like hanging out with friends and missing weddings and all those little things. And I like, sometimes I'm just like, It'd be so easy. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to put it into perspective here, but the way I felt, and like, I know every player goes through it, and it's just that shift in mentality truly is what it comes down to, and finding your way to go after the success, and to do whatever it takes to get there, and to chase the dream. Because sometimes, like, it's gonna hit you, and it's gonna hit you like a wall where, you may crash, and then you may not be able to recover from it, especially in our league, and like our league in the sport of hockey, where there's always someone chasing your job, and having that mentality of, well, if I take a day off, my job could be gone at any point in time, and it might be too late. And so if you can always just keep chasing it, and I think the best players in the world do that. I mean, you still see it to this day. Like, I just watched a video the other day of Crosby in his summer training, and it looks like he's 21, and he is in full speed in the middle of summer. And you listen to all the podcasts and the comments about him, and he still trains like he is a young kid, and he does everything he can to be the best. And I think because he's always chasing that dream, and he doesn't take it for granted. And I think he's chasing that success, and I think it'll come back to bite you in the butt if you wait a little too long. And I mean, there it goes like that, and there's a lot of regret. And I know a lot of people that have regrets that didn't get the opportunity to go to the next level. So, I think you make a really good point there.
Got it. And one thing I think that it's not something that people talk about a lot in hockey, and so this is one of those kind of things where I'll say, like, we can cut this if you don't feel comfortable sharing this part of it. But when it comes to dealing with people being like right on your tail, like behind you, like ready to take your spot, like, it's one of those things with hockey culture that we try to pretend, like, if we listen to like a Spit and Chicklets podcast or whatever, like, my career was always this joyride and it was never stressful, when in reality, if you really zoom in, like, I know for me and almost all the players I played with, so it's not like I'm just only in my head, like, I had hundreds of conversations with players throughout my career and still do. There's this insane kind of like elephant in the room, which is everyone is always ready to take my spot at all times. And I know for me, there was kind of this, like, it's easy to say now because I'm not playing, but like, it was kind of just I don't give a fuck about anybody. Like, I'm going to like anybody's spot because I know that even though we're friends, like, people are willing to stab me in the back if they have to get my spot. And so that's why I say, like, we can cut it if you want, because obviously this is a touchy subject for lots of people.
Yeah.
But it's not talked about enough. And what I'm curious about is, like, how do you kind of navigate that, and mentality wise and just like psychologically, to try your best to make the most of it? Because I know no one has it perfectly figured out, but like, I'm just curious.
Yeah, and it is like a touchy one, and there, at the end of the day, I don't think there's hard feelings with anything, because it is your job. And I would say at my level now, it's understood, because for the most part, everyone's been there, has dealt with it, and they've been in those situations. Like, I go back and I think to the college, where I'm sitting there with my best friend next to me, and we get the lineup in the morning, and he's scratched and I'm in the lineup, or vice versa, whatever it may be. And you sit there and you look at him and you're like, ooh, and he's pretty upset. But deep down, it's like, okay, he sucks that he's out, but I got to get ready. I have to be ready, because if I'm not, I know he's coming for my spot, and I'm not going to let him take that. And yeah, it's a huge elephant in the room, but it's kind of, I mean, it's a who gives a fuck mentality, I think, is what you said perfectly. And I think at the end of the day, you can be friends with anybody and you can have these relationships, but there's always going to be that thing in the back of everyone's head of, okay, I'm better than this person. I'm not going to let him take my job, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep this job. And it's okay to have that mentality. I think we're all human. It's normal, but it's when you can understand that and not feel bad for that person, whoever it may be. I think that's the big step as like a person and as a player, and that's going to help you at each level. And there's no elephant in the room in pro. It's the coaches literally tell you in front of the entire team, like, hey, you're not in the lineup, and they're not going to tell you why. And then they may go and, they're pretty upset about it, but what are they, that they're going to try to do everything they can to get in the lineup the next game. And that night, if you don't go out there and do what you're like supposed to do, your job may be at risk. And I think that is what has helped me develop into a better player and a better person, is I'm able to understand that and be level-headed and understand that, yeah, he's frustrated and upset and I can still be there for him, but I got a job to do and I got to figure out what I'm going to do. Because whatever, at the end of the day, this guy, it's about me, and it's about me and my family and my whatever, however you want to look at it. When you have kids, it's about your kids and financially supporting them. And yeah, it's a job at the end of the day, and it's a business, and it always will be. So I'm not saying you can't make those friendships and relationships that may last you a lifetime, but yeah, they may stab you in the back when you're most vulnerable. And so it's always good to be prepared for it. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, it's your job, and it's a little fun topic to talk about, and I think it's important for people to understand too, because it's something that you may not think about until you're in that situation.
Yeah, and the reason I talk about a lot of this stuff is because it's a lot of times when you're younger, and this is kind of a topic I want to transition to a bit here, is when you're younger, there's certain things you wish you could go back and just tell yourself, like, hey, like, just so you know, for example, for me in minor hockey, none of that mattered. All the times where I was heartbroken that I didn't get to play it as much as I should have, all the times that a coach said something negative to me, all the times I had politics that got in the way, I remember there was these deep sadness, and I remember so many negative things. And I think a lot of it, if I'm being real, comes from your parents are stressed because they're doing so much for you, and then they watch you get hurt and kind of reinforce the negative cycle. Mm-hmm. But what I'm curious about is for you, because I mean, I talk on this podcast all the time about this kind of stuff, but how would you kind of talk to yourself about that type of thing looking back? Or maybe if there's some other things you would say, but things that are just so stupidly obvious now that when you were there in the moment, it just was no, this is reality. This is the end of the world, or whatever it is. What do you kind of think?
I go back and I think of all the times where I'd get done with just a youth hockey game and I'm like, why didn't I play this much? Or I could have scored more goals because of this. Or maybe, well, if his dad wasn't the coach, I would have played more. You think about all that, and then you go home and you tell it to your parents, and your parents, like you said, reinforce it, and it creeps into your mindset. And not that it's a bad thing, but it's just so stupid. You think that you think back to all those times, and there are kids that are still like that though. And I think that's another thing. That's the elephant in the room, is that's understood, is some people and some players have never gotten away from that. And at each level, you weed those players out, and they understand that, or at least everyone understands who that person is and why he's not succeeding, is because he's too caught up in the politics and too caught up in the pointing the fingers instead of pointing the finger at yourself. And I think a big thing I learned from one of my coaches, one of my recent coaches, is you should never point a finger. You should always point it at yourself at the end of the day, because either A, you're doing it too, or you're doing something else wrong or something different that should be better. And if you point a finger, you're just making yourself look worse. And I go back and I think to all the little things where I could have pointed a finger, but now as I keep growing, you just try to find ways to better yourself and to point the finger at yourself. Well, then there's still times like if you finish a game and you're like, oh, I could have had 2 points tonight, but I ended up -2 because my teammates missed my passes and they didn't score those wide open nets. But it's like if I would have put the pass in a spot for them to score, or like the right spot, or or maybe if I would have defended harder, I would have been +2 with no points. Things like that. And when you have that mentality creep into your head, I think that just hurts you a lot. And it's so stupid and like childish. And it's easy to get sucked into all that. And what helped me was going off, and I had the hard conversations with my parents and my friends. And I said, listen, I don't want to hear all this stuff. I don't want to hear the social media. I don't want to see that this this post was made about me or this and that. Like at the end of the day, I had those hard conversations of, I don't want to hear any of the outside noise because I know what I need to do and I know what I need to be successful and what I need to do. So I don't want to hear all that outside noise. And eventually I was just able to eliminate it. And I was just brutally honest with everyone. I said, I want to do this by myself. I don't need anyone else chiming in or telling me. Now, there is a certain point where you may still need that if you're a young kid coming up into hockey and you have a parent that's paying for all your stuff. But then like when I was off on my own and I was 18, I was still getting that little chime in my ear after games and this and that. And it was eventually like, I can't do this, because when it's coming from an outside source, it starts to creep into your head. And so I just had to eliminate it so I wouldn't change the person I am and like my mindset. So I just eliminated it, and I really just started to focus on myself and stuck to what I did best. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. There's a concept I learned from the guy who created like CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's basically exactly what you just said, which is whoever you point the finger at has the power in the situation. And
Exactly.
yeah, and I remember hearing that and it just kind of broke my brain, because until I understood every single situation, if you're around, and I'll say this, and I know this doesn't always sound great, but like normal people, like the average person will typically, they learn to point the finger as like their baseline, like gossiping, looking at other people and saying like, this person did this and that's why I can't do this, or if only I was in this location, or I had this person with me. The second you realize that all you're doing the moment that you shift any kind of blame, no matter what it is, towards anything externally, you just take, say you have 100 PowerPoints, you just take like 50% of them and just go, here, you can have them, and you don't even know you have them.
Right.
And the amount of coaches and players and parents that I've wasted, like probably if I had 100 every day, like it was tens of thousands of points that I would just give away to people. And it's crazy because you realize it's a mentality, and the way I say it is like kind of like mental software, like in a computer. It's something that if you can learn to change that, and you can truly like actually rewire the way that you think about blame. And this is the only other thing, the nuance there is you don't get good at being mad at yourself, right? Because if you do that, that's also a very negative path. But
Right.
it's actually just thinking of blame as power. That is
Absolutely.
like the shift.
It's wasted energy too. It's wasted energy on something that you could be more focused on, or working on something, and instead you're worked up for an hour, and maybe you just wasted an hour of your day
Yeah.
just because you were so mad. And we always make jokes in the locker room and stuff when like a guy makes a joke about someone or cracks a joke, and then like that person that got joked on keeps bringing it up, and you can tell it bothers them, and like, we're like, oh, they're in your head about that joke or whatever. And you're like, no, I'm not. But like at the end of the day, like you're giving that power, that energy back to that person that made the joke. And like, instead of just like, it is what it is, and like walk away, like, and that's just like another example, but at the end of the day, like when you can just eliminate that and focus all your energy on yourself and like the important things in life and not worry about those things. And that's all, for everything in life, I believe. I mean, it's so easy to point the fingers, especially nowadays. I feel like everything is pointing the finger. So I think if you can just hold yourself accountable, accountability is a huge thing for a player and a person and a human being.
Yeah, I agree. When you're in a hockey season, you're honestly in like any stressful situation as a player, and you're putting this like massive blame and energy towards something, and you're feeling super negative. I always ask them, imagine that if you could like zoom out and you could just be in like an alien looking down at this situation, and you didn't have any context. You're just like, okay, this guy's at this ice thing, and there's a bunch of people with metal things on their feet, and they slap a rubber like disc into a net, and he's crying about that, that his coach didn't put him on. This person that, and even coach is a concept we make up, but it's just funny because if you can zoom out and pull yourself out further and further, it really quickly shows you all this energy you're putting towards all these things and making it so big in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
If you zoom away, it's suddenly like it's just an ant in a like a on the earth. It's not
Right.
important anymore.
Right. It's useless and like the wasted energy. You just look at it, when you're able to just step back and wow, like why am I even mad or why am I even upset or maybe I didn't think the way my coach was thinking or my teammate and my teammate thought this because he saw this happening and you're like, oh, well, that actually makes sense. Everything I was just mad about for whatever was stupid and useless. And so I think, yeah, like that's a good little analogy just to take yourself away from the situation and look back as to, all right, am I overreacting or do I have a valid point here and kind of just understand like the situation and maybe just take a few deep breaths and, kind of just figure it out. So
I love it. Well, one other thing I'm curious with in building off that point of kind of your coach's perception, and the way that I always say this is like the mental filter that a player has on a situation, though it's like a lens they have on the world is it's going to dictate how you treat everyone around you. It's going to dictate how you act. Now, when you were dealing with coaches, and this is one of those nuanced questions where you could kind of go like any level with this, but was there anything with coaches, if you could shift the filter you had on that situation or the way you looked at your coaches or the way you communicated or saw them, was there anything that stood out to you? Because I'll offer some different things after, but I'm just curious, like for you, what were some of those things maybe where you wish you could have changed your filter on those situations?
yeah, and that kind of like stems back to growing as a player, and especially like the junior levels. You're still a young kid finding your way and your path, and it was so easy. I think back to all the times where it's like players mother effing the coaches, and like it's so easy to join in on that too. Yeah, like to put yourself in bad situations. So I mean, at each level, I think it also like it depends on the coach and like the coach that you have for sure. Because I know I've heard some stories about some different coaches as well, and I think that's just with every sport and every different situation. But yeah, I mean, I always look back and I've always prided myself on being a good person off the ice and like always listening to my elders, and that's just how I was raised growing up. So I never really got like too or tried to get too into that, but I mean, there were times absolutely where I was frustrated. I remember going home from the rink and like, I'm done. I'm not going back, or this situation's stupid because this guy doesn't deserve this. And you start to like, you just like that negative BS just like creeps into you. And then like you take it out on like the coaches that are there to help you, and they may see the game differently. And I've had coaches that have played professionally and have played at the highest level. And, it may sound like gibberish to you, but they know what they're talking about, and they're there to help you. Like I said, obviously that goes with the right coach, but most of the coaches out there are there for and move players on to the next level. And yeah, like, so those moments, I've had them, and there's some times where like I've talked back to coaches, and I wouldn't, probably the number one no I will ever say, never talk back to your coach. It's a bad look, and it's not something that I'm very proud of, and many players are proud of. And I know the game is so emotional and it's so passionate and so easy, but try to just listen and understand to what they're saying. And that's at each level. There's guys at every level that will motherfuck a coach and try to, and this is what should be happening is what they think. And then the coach is like, well, I'm the coach here. So I think a good mentality is to just like look up to your elders and know that they're there for a good reason and they want to help you. And if you have an issue with that, don't be afraid to communicate that and let them know, because most of the time the coaches will communicate back to you as to what they're thinking and what they're seeing. And sometimes they're wrong and they'll admit it to you. So I think it's super important to have a good level of communication with your coaches. But yeah, so the little stupid things at each level, I mean, I could sit there and I think stupid is different for everybody. Everyone has a different kind of stupid and stupid things they've done. But yeah, I would say like for your coaches wise and your staff and even your teammates, like respect your teammates. And I think it's just super important to help you grow as a player at each level.
Yeah, and in the way I typically tell a guy to think about this stuff is you're better off assuming the best of your coach. And a lot of times, I know for me, and this is just speaking like my own personal experience, a lot of times I would assume the coach was thinking the worst, and I would assume that they had bad intentions. And the funny thing about what you're saying, and I can see how this would lead to a lot of success in the long run, is by just having that filter of this person is older, they have more experience. And even if you're like me, who is very like super cerebral about like, well, what about this thing the coach said and how he said it and the way he treated this other guy, instead just accept that you're not going to know for sure. And if you want to know, have the conversation and ask. But best case, you're much better off just assuming he probably has good intentions for me. Because even if you're wrong, at least you spent all the time up until you found out in a positive place. And nothing is going to change when you do get to that moment you found out it is bad anyways. So again, it's just rational optimism essentially. But I think most players would really benefit from understanding like the basic rationale to just do that all the time.
Sure. You think, like, I think back to all the times when I'm in the room or coach says one thing to me and then maybe does something differently, or he treats a player like you said, like there's a certain situation where you're like, that doesn't really add up or make sense to what he said to me. And then you start to get in your own head and you're sitting there and you're like, oh, okay, he said this to me and I didn't do this right. And am I going to be in the lineup, or am I going to get moved down a line? And you get into this like snowball effect of just where these negative thoughts can pile on top. And it kind of deteriorates your mentality and your positive mentality. And there's some guys that won't have that conversation and they'll just hold it in and it'll destroy them at the end of the day. And then they built this resentment, which came from essentially nothing. But it started with something so small and it just turned into this huge little thing. And next thing you know, like they're out of their situation and maybe losing their job or whatever is because their whole mentality changed from something so little. So yeah, I think when you're able to just, like rationalize and make common sense of each situation and understand, maybe not to look into all the details and maybe not to just nitpick everything. And like, that's another thing though, it's easier said than done, because it's hockey. There's a lot of any sport, anything in life, there's a mental battle with everything. But if you can like rationalize it and almost just say, okay, like he probably didn't mean it that way, or, he went and he said one thing and did the other, but maybe he forgot that he said this to me. Like, there's just so many different other like outside factors that could, you know, like deter the situation and change it. But really, if you have like an issue and a problem, it's always just smart to just communicate and to have a face-to-face conversation and just be open and honest. And usually they'll give you the open and honest answer back.
Yeah. It's just this is one of those things where I say this from, I'm not perfect, and the goal is not to be perfect, but rather keep coaching yourself, or like, this is why I do what I do with like helping guys with the mental side, is when you're constantly being reminded of this stuff on a weekly basis, and you're not just going to hear this once and then you're never going to have this situation come up for you, and you're not just going to now, I'll respond perfectly every time. But it's the repetition and coming back to these points and reminding yourself, oh yeah, I'm doing that thing. I'm starting to get mad about something I don't know and I don't understand. And as you start to become older, sometimes the problem is you get more confident that you do know what's going on, and it turns out that you still don't really know. And this is what older people always tell younger people, is like, you don't know at all what's going on, because I used to be in this situation, and looking back, it's like being our age now and looking back to when we were like 12 and thinking, man, I'm so smart. It's like, well, no.
Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of having that humility. It sounds like that's like a skill you've developed, is having like humility in these situations, which allows you to kind of get the most leverage out of your coaching relationship and out of like how you deal with management, things like that. So I'm curious, like, is that kind of like something you've noticed, is like how you kind of leverage those relationships?
Sure, definitely. It's something that I take pride with myself on, and I'll just kind of get into a little bit personal. Like for this year, it was my first year of professional hockey, and I'm on an A contract, and no elephant in the room here. You have prospects and the young kids, and they're going to play. They're taking a chance on them. They've drafted these kids. They want to develop them. They're going to play. And I understood that. I know what was going to happen. I know what my role is. And when it happened though, boy, I was like, I don't like this at all. And like, I had to really tap back, and it took me a while. It took me about a full month to kind of figure myself out and to understand, like, okay, just take a deep breath and like try to understand the situation. And then eventually I was able to go and have that conversation with my coach as to, hey coach, like, I just want to know what's going on in the situation. What are you seeing and hearing from me? Is there something that I'm doing? What's the situation here? And he laid it all out there for me. And he just told me to kind of stick with it and understand that this is a part of life, essentially. Like, this is exactly what's going to happen, and you're going to have these moments. And he just asked me to stick with them, and I did. And I was fortunate enough to get a really good opportunity in the second half of the season. And once I had it, I kind of took it, and I didn't let anyone take it from me. And I wrote it, and we talked about it at the end of the year, and he thanked me for it. He thanked me for being there and sticking with it. And I think that was the biggest like self-accomplishment from it. It was that feeling of, oh yeah, I did stick with it. I did do this. And like, I didn't give up on my coach. I didn't give up on myself, and I was able to persevere through it. And I'm now a better player, and I'm in a better spot than I've ever been in, just because I was able to go back to, like that humility part, and just take a second. And when I mean second, for me, it was a month. And that's okay. Sometimes it's going to be more months. And I relied on the people close to me to get me through that. And I was able to communicate with them. And I know some people don't have it, but I feel like there's always someone out there that's willing to listen if you just find the right person. And you just got to like find the right resources. And when you do, just always go back to that. I would say like that mentality that we're trying to teach everyone right now is, don't let all that outside noise affect you, and just focus on what you do best. And if you can, it's funny, but like, if you can put your head on the pillow at night and sleep well, knowing that you're doing everything you can, even when shit might hit in the fan and it's not working out for you, but you can wake up and look in the mirror and be proud of who's in the mirror right there. And like, at the end of this season this year, I was proud of myself for getting through that adversity moment. And yeah, now I feel like I'm in a better position for myself. So.
What I take from that is that there's this clear understanding of like who you are and your identity, and what you are as a player allows you to know, even if I do face challenges, even if I do, like things don't work out exactly how I want, I know this is I'm going to continue to stick with this and not quit on myself. I'm going to like squeeze the juice out of every day, get the most out of it, because if you keep building your game, then at least I've maxed out what I can do, and then you allow the other stuff to kind of take care of itself. Do you feel like that's kind of how you frame it, or do you kind of frame it a little bit differently?
Yeah, I think I look at it as like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like life to me in a way that where like I'm in my own little world when I'm in hockey, and then I'm able to combine that with like the person I am away from the rink. And like I mix that into it's hard to explain that feeling that I have with like the person I am and the person I was able to develop myself, and how it translates like on the ice. And I was able to like take key points, I think, and just thinking about the talk we're gonna have today. But when I was moving up at each level, I think back to all the times, and like all the times where I was like, oh, I got to do all this, I got to do that. And like, instead of just taking like a step back and just like telling myself to slow down, and like mistakes are going to happen and it's okay. And you just have to learn from them, and to like fall back and understand that you're not on like this journey alone. If you have like those people around you, fall back on them and rely on them, and they're going to guide you in the right direction, and you're going to have all this different feedback and stuff. But what I was able to do with this feedback is make the decision that was right for me. I think that was like the best part about it with everything. And what makes me the person that I am is I take all this information that I've learned throughout my career, and I listen, I get like the pros and cons of each situation, and I make the right decision that's right for me, and I stick with it, and I don't let anyone change it, and I'm okay with it. And that kind of like rounds out like who I am as a person, and what has gotten me to where I am. And I understand that like life is life, and shit's going to happen. And so at the end of the day, I really just try to be the person that I am, and do it to the best of my ability, and be okay and be proud of who I am. And it's made me the player that I am. And I think that mentality is super important to have, and to not be someone that you're not, I think is a good way to put it. So I might have strayed away from the question a little bit there, but just like kind of getting into the broad spectrum of it, like that's kind of what I think about when I think about like my journey throughout my entire career.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one core point you made right at the end there about not trying to be something you're not. And I think it's there. I have this saying that I say to like all my guys is like, when a cliche statement makes sense, you really understand it. And the thing that always stands out to me with the idea of like knowing yourself and just being your own unique brand and self, it's that when you play, you're going to face a whole bunch of different like environments and situations, coaches, leagues, and the ability to understand that if you keep trying to fit yourself to be like a different person completely, and you always have your strengths, but you say, I'm going to forget about those and I'm going to change because this coach now, he needs me to be a totally different player. There's this interesting balance that has to occur where you have to kind of hold on to your identity and like what you're good at and your core pillar skills. But then there is a level of kind of adaptation that you have to make. And what I'm curious about is, because I never made the jump into pro, and you're obviously like one of the best leagues, about to be in the best league in the world. And I'm curious, like, what for you when you're navigating that kind of like holding on to your identity, but also managing shifting roles and adapting to what management needs? Like, how do you kind of frame that and handle that? And what are the kind of the nuances that go in or have went into it, especially like this year?
Sure, yeah. So at each level, you have a different role. And I've talked about that skill gap that gets better and better and smaller. And everybody at this level where I'm at now was the best kid growing up, was the best player in high school, was the best player on their junior team, was the best player on their college team. And then it's like everyone meshes together and they come together, and it's like you have to find your role, because maybe I'm not a scorer anymore. Maybe I'm not a playmaker, maybe whatever. But now the coaches and management look at you as this penalty killer, or, a guy that doesn't put up points but does all the dirty work, or they expect you to score goals, or they expect you to be the power play guy. And it's embracing that role and not getting frustrated and not saying, oh, I've scored goals or I've done points my whole life. Like, that's just what I know to do. But one, they've been there at that level for so long. They can see potential in different kinds of players, and they understand that based on maybe their skating, they're better penalty killers than they are this, or based on their hands, they're good on the power play, or they're passing, or they're shooting, so they're going to put them in this spot. And understanding that and like kind of embracing your role, I think, is super important. And I didn't really touch on it earlier, and I was thinking about it as you were talking, and it's not I don't want this like talk to be something where it's not about having confidence. Confidence is such an important thing with everything, but especially I feel like in hockey. And when I'm not feeling confident is when I think kind of shit hits the floor. And so I think I always call it like a good swagger. It's not being cocky, but it's being confident in yourself and knowing that whatever you're going to do and whatever you're asked to do on the ice, you're going to do it to the best of your ability. And yeah, I mean, for me, it was understanding at AAA, I had a lot of points. And then at juniors, I had a good amount of points, but it's starting to go down, and I saw it. And then at college, it was like, okay, I could still put up points, but now I'm starting to understand that I'm going to need more eggs in my basket, because I'm not going to be able to do this at the pro level. And once you kind of, that light bulb goes off in your head of, okay, I got to start to figure out my identity and like the person and the player that I am. And once you, I feel like, have that realization and that light bulb goes off, it's okay, talk to my staff and what can I do to like get better at this in those specific areas, but then also be an all-around player as well. Like, you still want to be good at all the other things, and that's how you're gonna. But like, I always think about all the guys in the NHL. There's defensemen and there's forwards that are on the fourth line. They play 5 minutes a night, but they make millions of dollars, and it's because they go out there, they do their job, they shut down the first line, they know their role, and they're okay with it. They're not mad and upset about it. They're not mad that they're playing 5 minutes a night. They know their role. They know what they're supposed to do, and they're getting paid for it. And there's defensemen that flip the puck off the glass, and that's all they do, and they get paid for it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's amazing. It's a great thing. And you can tell the players that have succeeded for a long time at each level and all the way to the NHL, and for many years, they've embraced their role, they've understood it, and they were able to be good at that. And then when you're good at your role, that's when you can start to, you keep your same pace at that role, but that's when you start to add the little things to your game where you get better and better and better each year. And I think, yeah, like, it comes with confidence and being confident in the person and the player that you are meant to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's a saying that stood out to me from Daryl Belfry, which is like, know your role, but always expand your label.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's like that's exactly it. You use this example in one of the group coaching calls we did in the academy, and saying about like putting the eggs in the basket, and it basically thinking of how can I make myself more versatile? How can I put more out into my game and not rely on if I have to score, or this is a bad game, or I have to make a certain amount of hits or this is a bad game. And I think if I was to pull any real core, like, tactical skill out of what you just said, it's how effectively can you understand what your role is, but keep expanding the versatility so that, yes, you maybe are a star when you're like, for example, like obviously you put up great numbers and were a great player in college, but if you only focused on just being offensive and just kind of like specializing essentially instead of, it's not generalizing, but it's understanding what your specialty is currently and then expanding so that you could be a specialist on the PK or a specialist on the fourth line. Like, a lot of guys don't like that because it doesn't seem flashy, but if you become tactical about that long term, I think that that's almost like what you said. Like, you can make millions of dollars by committing to that for 5 to 10 years and developing yourself in that direction.
Absolutely. And I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity that I had a coach in college that was able to relay that message to me because I had never really understood it at that point. And I think this is the great thing about this podcast is being able to tell these kids and these players that are developing that if they can figure it out earlier, they're going to see a lot more success. You're not figuring it out when you get to the pro level or the college level, but you already have it figured out. And then they're going to be like, wow, this kid's got it figured out. Like, now we can really start to expand on his game and like make this kid a stud kind of a thing. And that's like the fun part about it. And I was able to find those eggs and put them into my basket. And I was a winger my entire life. Well, my coach moved me to center in college because he thought it would add a different skill / position to my gameplay, and it would make me a smarter player, being able to have to play 200 feet below the defensive end and all the way in the defensive end. And that really, once I started to realize like, oh, okay, he actually makes sense. He knows what he's talking about here, and he's trying to help me. I really started to embrace that, and that's when I made the switch of, okay, I'm not just going to work on shooting after practice. Like, today I'm going to go work on defending with a good stick, or I'm going to work on blocking shots, or I'm going to work on faceoffs. And it may not be the stuff that everyone sees on the score sheet every night, but the being versatile and being able to have all those different aspects to your game. And if you can do it at such a younger age, I think that's just like, that's it. That's the golden prize. Like, those are the kids and the players that you see are getting drafted that are in the first round, like these high level players, because they can almost do it. Now you have your specific players but you're seeing a lot more of these kids nowadays that are getting drafted, and they have these different eggs in their basket and they can do it all. And you see a lot of these like star players too that are killing penalties and are really good defensively. And like, I kind of fell in love with Barkov this year, just watching like their journey and understanding. And we've talked about this so many times, but he has his teammates and stuff that say he could have 20 to 30 more points a season, but he's so good everywhere else on the ice. And that's what makes him such a good leader and such a good player. It's because he doesn't care about being the flashy one, because he knows that if he does the little things right and all the dirty things, the things that don't show up on the score sheet every night, his team has a better chance to win. And it just proves everything and what happened this season. So I think it's a good mentality that I think that this might be one of the biggest points to talk about in this, or like for people to take from this podcast, based on the on-ice performance of the game. And I think it's just super important. And if they can figure it out at an earlier age, they're going to see a lot more success along in their career.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, being a complete player, it might not show up on the score sheet, but it will show up in your salary in the long run. And I think it's a crazy idea when you first hear stuff like that, because most people think, well, it's the flashy skills, it's these really big things that jump out to you, it's the stuff on the score sheet that you clearly see, goals, assists, plus minus. But at the end of the day, there's these nuances to the game that are the actual things that get people paid. And that's kind of the place I'm like starting to move into and start to really help guys with. And I think that's going to be like you've highlighted, that's going to be the thing that makes a difference for you. And as you move up is, am I actually a complete enough player to handle what might come? Or have I focused so much on the score sheet stats and looking good right now and hoping that that ends up leading me to success, when in reality, the thing you need to essentially optimize for is completeness. At least that's the way I'm starting to kind of think of it. And I think that would make a big difference for people.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that if you're this elite scorer, don't stop scoring goals. Like, because you're always going to have those players that are just for goals, and like then your playmakers and your passers and your whatever and your penalty kill guys, like you're gonna have those. But I think the message behind it is, we're gonna see more players and starting to make the NHL and start to push for the NHL. Instead of having this small little group, this group is going to get bigger and bigger, because if they can, and we can help them with this message of being a complete player at a younger age, where it's harder to, because I think a lot of that outside noise, and you have parents and coaches, and you lose the little details in your game, I think at a younger age. But if we're able to have that mentality at that younger age where, okay, like I can start to work on these little things, that's when you're going to see yourself maybe in the future in the National Hockey League. And I mean, you got to go back and think, I don't know how Barkov has trained his whole life and whatever, but I can guarantee you he was doing this, all his qualities that he has as a player on the ice, like I guarantee you he's doing them at 16, 17, 18 years old. And he was able to add on to that every single year, get better at something else, get better at scoring goals, get better at playing defense. And he was able to add more of it. And now he's this superstar, this complete player. And so I think when you're able to shift that mindset at an earlier age, it's so important.
Love it, man. All right, well, I know our time is pretty much up here, so is there anything else really quickly for the last minute or so you want to kind of throw in to kind of finish off for today?
No, I think we kind of nailed like a good little, I think we got over a lot today. And it's so easy to sit here, and I don't want the mentality side of it, because it's not all mentality. It's also like the work that you put in, and everything is not going to be just mentality and showing up to the rink and, oh, I think I'm going to score, so I'm going to score kind of thing. Now, that's not a bad thing, but you also have to put in the work too. But I know you do as well, be able to help hone in on these little details that you may not think about on a daily basis. So I think that's kind of our goal here, is to be able to just relay some different key points in different situations that we've both been through and now I'm currently going through, to help everybody grow as a player. So I'm super excited, and yeah, it was fun.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was exactly what I was hoping in terms of kind of the points we were able to hit. So, hopefully we can have you on more often and kind of keep these details going. So if people did enjoy this and you really did want, you do want to hear more from Brendan and just have us keep digging into this stuff, let us know. But otherwise, thanks a lot, man, for being on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Horton.
You're welcome.